Sometime, not long ago, in the misty hills of Appalachia, a young woman named Sarah Matthews stood alone under a black umbrella as rain poured down over her grandmother's grave. She was 8 months pregnant, abandoned by her husband and surrounded by family who barely hid their whispers. While others cried polite tears, Sarah's heart felt hollow. She had lost the only person who ever believed in her. Inside the mansion afterward, the lawyer began reading Eleanor Blackwood's will. The mansion went to one cousin, the beach, house to another, and the family fortune was divided like pieces of a pie. Then, with a pause, he said, "To my granddaughter, Sarah Matthews, I leave the cabin at Willow Creek and all that lies within." Laughter rippled around the room. "A cabin?" someone scoffed. "She gets a shack." Sarah kept her head down, but her fingers gripped the rusted iron key the lawyer pressed into her hand. It was heavy, old, and engraved with strange patterns. A cruel joke, they thought, but as she drove days later through twisting forest roads, something about that key called to her. The city faded behind her, replaced by endless trees and fog. Then, just as the road turned to dirt, she saw it, a small wooden cabin standing in a clearing. The porch was swept, firewood stacked neatly outside. When Sarah slid the key into the lock, it turned smoothly, and the door creaked open to a faint amber glow. Inside was warmth, a fire already burning in the hearth. Someone or something had been waiting. The cabin was old, but strangely alive. The air smelled like cedar, herbs, and rain. Everything inside looked as if it had been cleaned that morning. On a table near the fire sat an envelope sealed with green wax and marked with her name in her grandmother's handwriting. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened it. "My dearest Sarah," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then you have found your way home. This cabin has been waiting for you, as it waited for me." Her grandmother wrote that their family had protected this land for generations, that every woman who came here found it when she needed it most. "What seems small is great," the letter said, "and what seems forgotten is eternal." Eleanor described a light that could guide the keeper, a spring behind the cabin with healing waters, and a truth that shines in darkness. Sarah didn't understand, but her heart ached reading it. That night, as wind whistled through the trees, she lit an old oil lamp by her bed. Instead of a normal yellow flame, the light glowed blue and cast moving shapes on the walls, symbols that shifted and danced. Then she noticed something. One panel of wood near the bed had a small seam, almost invisible. She pulled at it gently, and it opened to reveal a carved box and a leather journal. The first line read, "I came to the cabin alone, frightened and expecting a child. My name is Margaret Blackwood, 1932. Sarah gasped. It was her great-grandmother. Page after page told stories of women who came here in times of crisis and found strength. In the morning, sunlight broke through the clouds and spilled across the clearing. Sarah found an old hand-drawn map folded inside the journal. It showed the woods surrounding the cabin and strange symbols marking certain places. One looked like a star, another a crescent moon. Curious, Sarah followed the path marked with a crescent, her boots crunching through leaves until she reached a massive oak tree beside a flat stone. When she touched the stone, faint blue light shimmered under her palm, forming glowing lines like roots spreading through the earth. A map appeared, not of land above, but of rivers running below, underground streams feeding life through the forest. It was beautiful and terrifying. Back in the cabin, she noticed something else. As evening fell, moonlight through the window, reflected on the wooden floor, showing a pattern, 5 shining dots forming a constellation, Cassiopeia. Her great-grandmother's golden key, which had been tucked inside the journal, fit perfectly into a knot in the floorboards at the constellation's center. With a soft click, the floor opened, revealing a hidden staircase leading into darkness. The air below was cool and smelled like old paper. Carrying a lantern, Sarah descended and found shelves upon shelves of journals, boxes and bottles. Old family records, pressed flowers, and jars of herbs lined the walls. And in the center sat a single large book with a tree symbol carved into its cover, the Blackwood Grimoire. Inside were pages written by women from every generation before her, recipes, cures, and wisdom, but also warnings about protecting the land and how light could reveal what danger tried to hide. Sarah realized then her grandmother hadn't left her a home. She'd left her a legacy. For days, peace settled around the cabin. The air felt cleaner, the nights quiet except for the sounds of frogs and owls. The pantry never emptied, the fire never went out. And somehow, Sarah felt stronger every morning. Then one afternoon, the crunch of tires broke the silence. 2 cars, a shiny black Range Rover and a silver Mercedes, pulled up in the clearing. Out stepped Victoria and James, her wealthy cousins. They smiled, but their eyes were sharp. "Sarah, you look rural," Victoria said, her voice dripping with fake kindness. "You shouldn't stay out here all alone. This land is worth a fortune. Developers are offering millions for properties around here. We can help you sell." Sarah said nothing, just watched the smoke curl from the chimney. "I'm not selling," she said quietly. James frowned. "Be reasonable. You're about to have a baby. You can't raise a child in the woods." But as they spoke, the fire inside the cabin blazed higher. The iron pendant around Sarah's neck grew warm, pulsing like a heartbeat. She looked at her cousins, her voice calm but firm. "This place has stood for generations. It doesn't belong to you, or to anyone else." The wind outside howled through the trees, shaking the windows. Victoria took a step back. "You'll regret this," she hissed. But Sarah didn't flinch. As their cars disappeared down the muddy road, thunder rumbled across the hills. When she touched the hearthstone by the fire, it burned hot beneath her fingers. A storm was coming, and something inside her whispered that this was only the beginning. That night, the wind began to rise. Trees groaned outside as thunder rolled across the valley. The air inside the cabin grew heavy, and the old wooden walls creaked as if the house itself was holding its breath. Sarah felt a strange pressure in her stomach, a deep, twisting pain. Her baby wasn't due for weeks, but her body told a different story. Lightning flashed, and the lights went out. She tried her phone. No signal. Panic hit her. Alone, in the middle of the forest, with the storm raging outside and labor beginning. Then she remembered her grandmother's final words in the letter. "When you feel lost or afraid, ring the silver bell." Sarah stumbled to the old chest near the bed and opened it. Inside, buried beneath a folded quilt, lay a small bell made of silver, its handle engraved with tiny vines. She lifted it and rang it once. The sound was clear and soft, yet it seemed to travel through the storm itself. Minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Sarah hesitated, her heart racing. When she opened it, an old woman stood there, dry, calm, and smiling, even though rain poured around her. "You called," she said gently. "I'm Margaret Sullivan, the midwife. I was here when your grandmother was born." Her voice was warm, kind, and steady. Without another word, she stepped inside, hung her shawl by the fire, and began preparing towels and blankets. The cabin, which had been trembling under the storm, seemed to grow quiet again, as if welcoming her. Sarah lowered herself onto the bed as another wave of pain came, and the midwife took her hand. "You're not alone, dear," she whispered. "Every woman in your family has given birth in this house. You are part of something older than fear." Hours passed in thunder and pain. The wind screamed through the forest, but the cabin held strong. The old walls glowed faintly with warmth, as if the wood itself was alive and watching over her. Between contractions, Sarah saw shadows on the ceiling, faint shapes of women, faces kind and patient, like ghosts of her ancestors. "They're with you," the midwife said, following her gaze. "Every keeper who came before. The babies." Arrival was long and painful, but just as dawn broke, the storm began to fade. The last bolt of lightning lit up the forest, and then silence. Moments later, a cry filled the cabin. Sarah's daughter had arrived, pink-faced and strong. The midwife smiled and placed the baby in her arms. "Born at dawn, on the equinox," she said softly. "The 13th generation." Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she held the tiny life against her chest. The first rays of sunlight slipped through the window, landing on the wooden floor. And then, incredibly, small green shoots pushed through the cracks, blooming into white flowers. The cabin seemed to breathe, filling with the smell of fresh earth and spring. The midwife looked at Sarah, her eyes shining. "The land recognizes its keeper," she whispered. "The bloodline continues." Sarah looked down at her baby, her heart full and aching, and whispered, "Welcome home, my little Eleanor." The baby opened her eyes, bright green, just like her great-grandmother's, and the fire flared as if in greeting. The storm had washed the world clean. For days afterward, the air around Willow Creek felt different, lighter, fresher, alive. Sarah felt stronger too, like the earth itself was giving her energy. One morning, as she nursed her baby by the fire, she noticed a loose board in the wall. Behind it was a small safe, locked but familiar. She used her grandmother's ring to open it. Inside was a folded letter, a small gold key, and several documents. The letter was addressed to her in Eleanor's careful handwriting. "My Sarah," it began, "if you're reading this, you've already found what I could never explain while I was alive. The cabin is not just a home. It's the heart of the Blackwood land. Our family was chosen to guard it." The letter went on to reveal that Eleanor had used her wealth and influence to keep the land safe from developers, pretending to be a distant landlord while secretly protecting the woods. "The cabin," she wrote, "sits over sacred springs, water that heals, feeds, and protects. You must keep it hidden from greed," the letter warned. "One day your daughter will understand. Until then, teach her to listen to the land." Sarah wept softly as she read. She understood now that every woman before her, Margaret, Eleanor, all of them, had lived and died for this. The family's real inheritance wasn't money. It was magic, love, and protection woven into the roots of the earth. And now that responsibility belonged to her. Weeks later, her cousins returned, furious with lawyers and threats. But this time Sarah wasn't afraid. The local court dismissed their claims, siding with the will and the documents Eleanor had left behind. Even the developers withdrew after discovering the land was protected by an ancient conservation deed. Victoria's anger melted into disbelief. You planned this," she spat. Sarah just smiled. "No," she said softly. "Her grandmother did." When the cousins finally left, defeated, the lawyer handed Sarah one last envelope. Inside was a blank leather journal embossed with the image of the Blackwood tree. "She wanted you to have this," he said. That night, as the fire crackled and baby Eleanor slept in her cradle, Sarah opened the journal and wrote the first words. "I am Sarah Matthews, 13th keeper of the Blackwood legacy. This is our beginning." She set down the pen and looked toward the window, where moonlight touched the trees. The cabin glowed faintly, as if alive with gratitude. Sarah smiled through quiet tears. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered. The wind outside rustled through the branches like a soft answer. And as the night deepened, Sarah knew that this land, this ancient breathing world, would live on through her and her daughter. If this story touched your heart, if you believe some places hold the power of memory, love, and protection, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because somewhere another keeper is waiting to find her home, and her story is yet to begin.